Israel and Iran are holding talks in Brussels. The meetings are being called informal, and they're taking place on the sidelines of an international conference on non-proliferation. But that hasn't stopped speculation about more substantive contact in the future. We ask, how serious are Iran and Israel about creating a nuclear-free Middle East? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Taimur Nabili. Now, a British newspaper has been reporting that Israel and Iran are taking part in nuclear non-proliferation talks in Brussels. Representatives from the US, the EU and some 10 other Arab states also attending what is billed as an academic conference. But the delegations are being led by senior officials with their government's backing. The newspaper says the objective is to lay the groundwork for a full international conference on banning nuclear arms from the Middle East. So how serious is this subject? To answer the question, I'm joined by three guests. In Brussels, Mark Fitzpatrick is director of the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Programme at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. He's also a former official of the US State Department. In Tehran, Mohammad Marandi is associate professor at the University of Tehran. And in London, joining us via Skype, Alireza Nourizadeh, director of the Centre for Arab and Iranian Studies. Thank you, gentlemen, all for joining us on the programme today. Mark Fitzpatrick, if I may begin with you. You've been attending these talks. Tell us what is the background to this meeting and what is the truth behind these comments about contact between these apparently warring parties?
Well, I hate to pour cold water on this story, but the headline in today's Guardian got it wrong. But the content, as you've described it, was correct. This was an academic conference with participation from many states in the region, including several participants from both Israel and Iran. There were no direct talks between those two parties that I observed at the conference, and I would be surprised if there were. But both participated in a productive manner in the discussions, which were held in a positive and constructive approach towards, first of all, go ahead.
Sorry, I saw you quoted in that same article.
Well, I want to say that
you said was slightly misinformed. I saw you quoted as saying that the fact that they were both there and were both playing nice, as it were, was a significant event. Is that true?
I think it's significant, yes, that countries can come together in an academic setting and talk about very serious issues. There are serious disagreements. I wouldn't say that those two particular parties were in agreement on many things, but this was a good discussion, and it was in a positive attitude, and it was more positive than some of the other conferences I have been at on this subject.
Alireza Nourizadeh, are you surprised that Israel would even be at a conference on nuclear non-proliferation?
No, I'm not, because the Israeli, while they never admit or deny having nuclear bombs, but you know they've been attending certain conferences, if it is within an academic level, and I think nothing will come out of these sort of talks, because you know the point is, from the Iranian perspective, those who are participating in these conferences, they have no authority. I mean, they are university professor, researcher, journalists, or these sort of people, and they have no authority. In Iran, there is only one person make decision, who is Ayatollah Khamenei. If he decides to have a nuclear bomb, nobody can prevent him. And if he decides to stop this or to pursue the matter, then nobody else can challenge him.
That may well be the case, but at issue here is the question of whether this conference suggests the desire to talk. Mohammad Marandi, as far as you're concerned, do the Iranian representatives at that conference go there with the blessing of the Supreme Leader, and do you think it's significant that the parties are there?
Well, the Iranians take part in many conferences, both academics as well as foreign ministry officials, as well as government officials in different branches. So this is really nothing new. The Iranians, of course, have said all along that they will pursue their rights as an independent country. They are not pursuing nuclear weapons. The political establishment has not at any point pushed for nuclear weapons. In fact, the leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has said specifically that nuclear weapons is forbidden in Islam. So the Iranians are quite willing to talk. The Iranians have been talking with the 5+1. And if Western governments are willing to recognize Iran's rights as an independent state, the Iranians are quite willing to be open and to resolve any issues that they may have with regards to the program.
Let me stop you there for just a moment, because I want to draw a distinction here between the question of nuclear weapons and whether Iran should have them, is trying to have them, and those issues, and the question of nuclear non-proliferation. Mark Fitzpatrick, let me come back to you. I mean, this conference is supposed to be about non-proliferation, and Israel doesn't really generally take part in this kind of conversation because it doesn't want to start having to own up to the fact that it has nuclear weapons in the first place. So why has Israel turned up at this conference, whereas, from what I understand, they generally try to avoid this kind of conversation?
Well, this conference that we held in Brussels was directed both toward confidence-building measures and the establishment of a WMD-free zone in the Middle East. The Israelis are very concerned about security issues, as are many countries in the region. So to create a zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction will require a greater sense of security of all the parties. And that's in Israel's interest to talk about these security issues.
The point here
if it was a conference that was just directed at Israel's...
To create a weapons-free area in the Middle East would require Israel to not only own up to the fact that it has them, but to give them away, which is something that seems highly unlikely, doesn't it?
Well, it's highly unlikely today and tomorrow, but Israel has said that when they are at peace with their neighbors and they feel secure, that they will join the NPT. So they don't rule out that forever. And what we are trying to establish through these kind of discussions is a way forward to try to create some trust where no trust exists, to try to create a sense of how to address security issues. They're very complicated issues. What should come first? Security, the Palestine issue, nuclear weapons, and this require a lot of discussion. And I'm glad that we were able to have this discussion in Brussels with some key participants, not just from academia, but from some government officials that participate.
Okay, you say it raises complex issues, but let me just outline for our viewers exactly what is at stake here. And actually, it boils down to one fairly simple precept, and that is Mr. Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister's contention that Iran is trying to get nuclear weapons. He's told the UN General Assembly recently that Iran could be in a position to make a nuclear bomb by the middle of next year, and he demanded that a message be sent.
A red line should be drawn right here. Before Iran completes the second stage of nuclear enrichment necessary to make a bomb.
And this was the response of Iran's president to Netanyahu's red line.
Why war? Whoever talks of war is condemned. Suddenly the psychological war was undermined. They are now nervous. Red line, white line, black line and the like is for children. This is the level of this guy's character. It appeared that his drawing was not good. He got it drawn by a machine. His drawing will get better if he practices more.
Alireza Nourizadeh, let me come to you. That, in a nutshell, is the situation between these two parties. It's complicated, but at the same time, it's pretty serious, and it doesn't seem to be making any progress. Is the talk of this kind of contact going to get us any closer to solving this situation, let alone having a nuclear-free Middle East?
Always talks is the best solution. I mean, to talk to each other, of course, it would be much better than threatening each other. But unfortunately, what we are seeing at the moment, in one hand, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, which seems to be taking control of everything, they are threatening every day. There is a new test of new missile, and every day they are talking about demolishing, destroying Israel. And then from the other side, we are hearing almost similar voices from from extreme Jewish lobbies and from extreme Jewish party and personalities. Fortunately, recently, Mr. Barak, the Israeli defense minister, said something which was raised hopes. I mean, he said it seems to be that the Iranians are more or less freezing or stopping their military side of their nuclear program. I mean, if the Israelis are convinced that's the issue, then I think we are getting to a different stage, and perhaps there will be more understanding of the need of Iran.
But the problem here is, as you say, the IAEA reported, and Ehud Barak has acknowledged that Iran has actually stepped back from its level of nuclear enrichment, and yet we still hear stories every day coming out. Benjamin Netanyahu 2 years ago demanding to be taken to almost attack status on this issue. Only today, Netanyahu again telling, or at least the report came out today, telling Israeli television in the past couple of days that it's still on his agenda to wage war on Iran. So it's a bit of a minefield here, isn't it?
I mean the same thing. I mean, you hear from Mr. Romney, from Mr. Obama, each of them, from his own understanding that, they draw the red line. I mean, for Obama, just attempting to make a bomb. For Romney, crossing the boundaries of 20% enrichment. For each of them. But at the end of the day, if the Iranians continue their current policy, if the Iranians ignore the warning coming to Iran from all sides, then unfortunately we will get to a point when the negotiation would not do anything. I mean, we reach a point when Israel, because it feels it's threatened, there is Hezbollah. What if the bomb fell to the hand of Hezbollah or Islamic Jihad or then the Israeli will act. Whether the Americans support them or not, they will drag the United States to a war with Iran.
Mohammed Marandi, we today heard that the Qatari government has been cleared to buy yet more high-tech weaponry from the United States. We've got the British Prime Minister David Cameron touring the Middle East. He's been to the UAE, he's in Saudi Arabia, trying to hawk British military equipment. Saudi Arabia has already lodged the biggest arms spending deal with the United States. And the talk always seems to be, as we heard from Mr. Nourizadeh there, about the security of Israel, the fears of the Arab states, and the threats from Iran. There's never any suggestion that Iran may indeed itself be felt to be under threat. From your position in Tehran, how does that look?
Well, I think that the Iranians believe that what the Europeans and the Americans are trying to do is to sell their obsolete weapons to Arab countries. And there is no threat, obviously, from Iran against any of these countries. In fact, I disagree completely with what your guest in London says. He said that the Iranians threatened Israel with destruction. I think you yourself conducted an interview with a senior Israeli regime's official who admitted that the Iranian president never made such a statement. In addition, earlier on, he said that in Iran only one person makes the decision, and later on he says the Revolutionary Guards are taking over. So these statements are, I think, intentionally misleading. The Iranians have never at any point pursued nuclear weapons. There is no evidence whatsoever. And again, contrary to what he says, that all sides are warning Iran. In fact, the non-aligned movement, which consists of 3/5 of the countries in the world, the majority of the international community, have from the very start, from years ago, they've supported Iran's nuclear program and every element of it, and they've never questioned it. So if one really wishes to see what the international community is saying, it is not saying what Western countries are saying or what your guest in London is saying. But there is a way forward, and that is for Western countries to respect Iran's rights. In fact, the nuclear program began with Western government support, and their companies before the revolution initiated the program. Billions of dollars were invested in this, and the Iranians are simply not going to throw this investment away because Western governments threaten it. Western governments are the ones who are constantly threatening Iran with war, and the Zionist regime is also threatening Iran with war, but Iran has never threatened any other country.
Mark Fitzpatrick, I saw you smile at a couple of those comments. What's your response?
Yeah. Well, look, Iran does not have a nuclear weapon today, and there's no evidence that it is building a nuclear weapon, but it is certainly preparing the capability to do so. And there's a massive evidence of Iranian work on nuclear activities of a possible military dimension. So there's a lot of evidence. There's not a conclusive proof.
But
there's a lot of
sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to be clear on what that actually means. Because there's a lot of evidence that they're working on a nuclear program. They've admitted to having a nuclear program, and while a lot of that work may be used in dual purposes, as you yourself say, there's no evidence that it is being used. So what is it exactly that we're trying to stop them doing? Because under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, they are allowed to do exactly what they have been doing.
Well, they're not allowed to do work that is related to weapons. They're allowed to do enrichment. They're allowed to have a nuclear power plant. Nobody denies Iran the right to have nuclear power. The question is, why is Iran engaged in enrichment when it only has one nuclear power plant, the fuel for which is provided by Russia? It doesn't need to do this enrichment. So this creates one suspicion. And then the various pieces of evidence that Iran was involved in work on triggers for nuclear weapons, in explosive devices, in chambers at Parchin and so forth. And Iran refuses to cooperate fully with the IAEA.
All right, let me let Mr. Marandi respond to that, because
level huge allegations, but there is reason for concern.
Speculation to all of this, Mohammad Marandi.
Yes, I mean, the Iranians' dual-purpose technology is dual-purpose technology, and the Iranians cannot refrain from development simply because something can be used in a different way. It's like saying you can't use a knife because you could use it to stab someone. The Iranians, in fact, during the Iran-Iraq war, when Western regimes were giving Saddam Hussein chemical weapons to use against Iranians, and using the Security Council, by the way, to prevent Iraq from being condemned, and I am a victim of those chemical weapons, and many of my friends died as a result, the Iranians never retaliated. Although the Iranians had all sorts of petrochemical plants and so on, they had the technology to develop nuclear weapons, but they didn't. So it's the Western powers that are answerable. And one final point is that there is no evidence that Iran pursued anything illegal. The Iranian enrichment right now is being used to fuel the Tehran experimental reactor, which produces medical isotopes for cancer patients, because Western countries refuse to give the Iranians the fuel.
Okay.
So they are supporting cancer patients while Western regimes were taking cancer patients hostage.
Ali Reza Nourizadeh, I mean, all of this conversation has been had many times in many different fora, but the question we're asking today is there progress afoot? Now, we've got the sanctions on Iran that many say are being effective. We've got the end of President Ahmadinejad's tenure, which may or may not be politically significant. But there do seem to be various little hints here and there that perhaps the two sides are trying to talk to each other in some way or another. Do you have any hope that there is a path forward here?
Yes. First of all, let me tell you, I correct Mr. Marandi. I said there is one man who makes decision, but this man needs some tools, which is Revolutionary Guards, and they are doing what that man instructs them to do. As far as the hope, we are all optimistic. We have all hopes that one day the Iranian leadership realize and understand that they cannot hide, they cannot lie. I mean, one of the reasons that the Iranian had problem, because they lied, they kept lying and lying until something discovered, and then they come and say, well, yes, that was for a peaceful purpose. No, you have to be transparent. Your program should be clear to the international bodies which are concerned.
But the question is, do you see a path towards some sort of rapprochement here?
The change of mentality, the change of views, as long as Ayatollah Khamenei make decision, we don't have a solution. I hope there will be a new leadership in Iran which understand. If Mr. Mousavi was our president, I'm sure it would have been totally different.
All right.
Rather than Mr. Ahmadinejad, who wants to demolish the state of Israel.
Mark Fitzpatrick, I mean, if we're talking about the potential for future diplomacy succeeding, can it succeed in the light of what I mentioned earlier on, and that is the massive rearmament of the Gulf states? and Iran's neighbors. As I say, we keep talking about the fears of attack by Iran, but should we not also be considering the fears of Iran that it may be attacked itself? And selling weapons to its neighbors is surely not going to help in any attempt at diplomacy.
I don't think Iran is too worried about United Arab Emirates attacking Iran. The weapons that are being sold to Iran's neighbors in the Gulf are to reassure them in the face of a greater Iranian capability, primarily missiles. Iran has several hundred missiles which have in fact been threatened to be rained down in terror upon the Gulf states. And I think
do you really think Iran is going to look at these multi-million-dollar arms deals and say, we've got nothing to fear from this?
Well, I think Iran has a great deal to fear from the United States, and they have something to fear from Israel. But the Gulf states are not going to pick a fight with Iran, given its much larger size and its missiles. But let me make a point here, that if Iran proceeds on this path of a nuclear weapons capability, it could cause a proliferation cascade in the region. Saudi Arabia has made very clear that if Iran gets nuclear weapons, it would want them too. One thing that these sales do to the countries of the Gulf is to provide them another means of defending themselves so they don't have to see a nuclear option as their way of matching Iran.
Okay, Mohammad Marandi, the argument of a nuclear cascade, another fairly regular one. What's your response to that?
Well, I think it's completely untrue. The Iranians are working within the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and the Iranians have that right, and they will continue to pursue that right. That is what makes Iran an independent country. Iran is not Saudi Arabia. It's not a client regime that's aligned to the West. Iran, the revolution itself was about independence. And contrary to what, again, what your guest in London says, Iran was never dishonest. I think he has more of a problem in that particular field than Iran does. The Iranians have, from the very start, they've declared all their installations, all Iranian nuclear installations are being monitored by the IAEA 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with cameras, and there are permanent people from the IAEA in Iran stationed here. But what is most important, I think, is the fact that, and I think this is something that should be taken seriously, Iran does not fear the Israeli regime. The Iranians have never threatened the Israeli regime. Iran does not consider Israel legitimate because it's an apartheid state, like South Africa. But the Iranians have never threatened it with an attack. However, if the Israeli regime does decide to carry out a military attack against Iran, the response from Iran will be both robust and severe.
All right.
And I think that the United States also knows that an attack on Iran would be devastating for the global economy. The United States and its allies would be condemned, and the United States would not win. Everyone would lose.
Gentlemen, we're out of time, but one final response to Alireza Nourizadeh. You said that every decision and every move is made by the Supreme Leader, and yet so much of international anger and accusation is focused on the President, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He is going to give up the presidency next year. Do you think that might change the equation in any way?
Well, I hope there will be a fair election. I hope there will be some reformists nominate in the election, and then we'll see changes in Iran. But as long as the same so-called radical policy is pursued by Khamenei, and somebody else will replace Ahmadinejad who will obey his master, there won't be any changes.
All right, there we will have to leave it. Thank you very much indeed to all my guests. In Brussels, we had Mark Fitzpatrick, in Tehran, Mohammad Marandi, and in London, via Skype, Alireza Nourizadeh. And thank you very much indeed for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. You can always send us your feedback by email. The address is insidestory@aljazeera.net. But that's it for the moment. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.